What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham Jason Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network, as well as on Viceland, as today we're talking for the very first time about the dark side of the ring. Now, I know I'm way late to the party on this. I got several recommendations to watch the show about a year ago when it first premiered in like March or April. I know it wrapped up in May. I heard a lot about the show. It originally ran on Viceland last spring. Season 2 is coming back this Tuesday. And I had this in my watch later playlist for so long on YouTube because all the episodes, originally were for free on YouTube. If you go, if you search hard enough, they're on there. They're also available in full on like Viceland's website, on vice.com or whatever. So you can find the episodes from the first season right now online if you want to check them out, and you definitely should. I slept on this show for so long, not because I didn't want to watch it, but I just never had the time. And the episodes individually are around 45 minutes. And I knew if I watched one, I would want to watch them all. So I've been watching them on occasion, not really on occasion, but I think I watched the Bruiser Brody one first with Alexis about a week ago. We absolutely loved it. We've been watching it every episode since. So these are going to be out of order. I watched the Bruiser Brody episode first, and then I think we watched the Montreal Screwjob one a day or two later. And then we watched the Fabulous Moolah one the other day, I think on Wednesday. And then we watched the last of the Von Erichs one on Monday during Raw, during the Royal Rumble when they replayed that. We already rewatched it about a month ago. So we're like, why don't we watch Dark Side of the Ring instead? And that's exactly what we did. And by the time that it was over, the Rumble was still on. That's how long that Rumble replay was on Monday. But anyway, so these will be completely out of order. This is episode 2 of season 1, the Montreal Screwjob, which I talked a lot about already on Monday's episode of Broken Skull Sessions right here on Network and Chill. Stone Cold had Bret Hart on. So I already kind of talked a lot about this, and the issue with doing these reviews in retrospect, not only because I need new content here for the channel, but I thought I would talk about it because this show is so good. And I'll probably do more of these type of reviews going forward. I will definitely take notes for the next few episodes that I watch. We still have yet to watch the Death of Gorgeous Gino episode. I think that was episode 5, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was episode 5. And we actually have yet to watch the first episode, which I'll probably save for last because Alexis knows Macho Man. So we'll save that one for last. That one was called The Match Made in Heaven. So again, my reviews will be up in different orders. I'll probably try to get through 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then, or at least what I've seen so far. I'll probably put up 2, 3, 4, 6, 5, and then 1. And these will all be up, I would assume, over the next week. Because I don't know if there's a lot of new network content going up on the WWE Network. I know there was a new Untold going up on Sunday, covering Dennis Rodman's time in WCW, which is pretty cool. I think that goes up first thing Sunday. I'll watch that review for Sunday. Beyond that, though, with this whole coronavirus thing going on, I don't think there's a lot to review. I don't know if they're putting up any new content. They probably will anyway, because it's all pre-recorded, but I'm not 100% sure. They're not doing ride-alongs during this point, at this point, unless it was recorded many months ago. So anyway, there's no new table for threes. They record all that stuff over Mania weekend. So when are they going to do that if there's no Mania this year? At least not in the usual form that they put it on. So anyway, Network and Chill will consist of these reviews, at least until Total Bellas comes back in a couple weeks. And until Tuesday, Season 2 will premiere on Tuesday, March 24th, I believe at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the Chris Benoit episode, which looks absolutely excellent. But in the meantime, though, enjoy this one. Season 1, Episode 2, the Montreal Screwjob. So again, I watched these about a week ago. What I usually do when I watch stuff on the network or on E or whatever, USA, I take notes while I watch the shows. I thought of reviewing these episodes well after I already saw them. So unfortunately, I couldn't take notes while watching the episodes. I'm kind of going off my memory here and looked up other people's thoughts on these episodes to kind of jog my memory about what each episode was about and what happened, what was said. So if I miss any key pieces of information, I apologize. So this will be a bit shorter than I had hoped. But this episode was narrated by Dutch Mantel, a.k.a. Zeb Coulter from WWE. He does the narration for all the episodes except for the Bruiser Brody one, because he's actually featured in that one because he was there for that, unfortunately. That one is narrated by Mick Foley. So he narrates this one. To kick this thing off, we hear the history of the Hart family in wrestling and the Hart Dungeon and how that kind of created a lot of stars, everyone involved with. Brett knew wrestling from like day one. He talked about how he knew wrestling holds and submissions and stuff like that from the moment he started training because his entire family was full of wrestlers trained by his dad, Stu Hart, and everyone else. So eventually, Bret and many members of the family soon after eventually signed with WWE, at that point WWF. They document Bret Hart's rise to the top. But this isn't a Bret Hart documentary. This is all about the Montreal Screwjob, which is kind of what they skip ahead to. And again, I'm missing a lot of key details here. Probably this one more than any other episode, because there was so much that went into the Montreal Screwjob. And we hear from a lot of different people, including Bret himself, obviously. We hear from a number of other people, Vince Russo, Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette is all over these episodes, and the guy is quite the character. We hear from, I believe, Bruce Pritchard as well, Eric Bischoff, who was running WCW at the time. They talk about how they really messed up Bret Hart when he went over there and how they kind of butchered his momentum and stuff like that. They talk about everything. So again, I'm not going to get into detail by detail here, but that's essentially who was featured on this episode. We don't hear from Vince McMahon. We don't hear from Shawn Michaels, although that would have been nice. They're both heavily involved today with WWE, and they don't want to be involved in a piece that probably criticizes the company for what they did 20 years ago. So I can't say I'm surprised that Michaels was not a part of this, nor was Vince McMahon. But they talk all about this thing, with how Bret Hart won the WWE Championship in 1992 and how they ran with Bret as the guy. And, Bret Hart was a different kind of dude at that point in WWF. He was a different type of babyface. That's exactly what wrestling wanted. And again, a lot of the stuff that they talk about here was discussed as well on the Broken Skull Sessions episode with Bret Hart on Monday. So if it sounds like I'm repeating myself, that's why. So he wins the WWE Championship. Actually, his feud with Shawn Michaels, while they had that famous match of WrestleMania 12, the Iron Man match for the WWE Championship that was won by Shawn Michaels. Their feud actually started on television years before that. What I didn't know up until a couple years ago was that they actually had a WWE... Was it a WWE title match? I think it might have been. At Survivor Series 1992. Why, I don't know. It felt like a filler main event. I think it was supposed to be Michaels, or rather Bret Hart versus someone else, but Michael filled in. I think he might have been the IC champion at the time. If it wasn't for the WWE title, then it was for the Intercontinental Championship. But either way, they had a match at Survivor Series 1992, well before their Montreal Screwjob match in 99, or rather 97, excuse me. And that was really when the bad blood began between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. Two completely different people. And Bret Hart always had an issue with Shawn Michaels. And things started to heat up behind the scenes, and Bret Hart was offered a deal, which I was quickly corrected on in my review on Monday, so I apologize for that. I wasn't really sure what they meant by the whole $1 million deal thing. Someone corrected me in the comments on my review on Monday, and if you check that out, I thank you. I appreciate it. But someone had noted that it was supposed to be $1 million a year for the first few years, and then it would kind of dwindle down from there as he became a trainer or whatever. He wouldn't be wrestling full-time for 20 years, is basically what that deal meant. Either way, it was way too lucrative of a deal for Vince to afford. Because the business was not in a great place at that point, WWE that is. So they eventually had to renege on the deal, and he had to go to WCW because that would be a better spot for him at that point financially. And I don't know if they talked about it here, but they definitely talked about in the Broken Skull Sessions episode where Bret Hart had mentioned that Vince was actually, pulling to negotiate the deal between Bret Hart and Eric Bischoff, which sounds absolutely bizarre, and it is. Why Bret would want that, I have no idea, and he ended up, telling him, no, I don't want you to do that, because, per his attorney's advice, his lawyer's advice. But anyway, so he signed with WCW, and Survivor Series was supposed to be his last night in Montreal for the WWE Championship. And a lot of this is, you probably already know because we've heard about the Montreal Screwjob so much over the last 20 plus years that this is hardly new information. But they talk a lot about how, Bret didn't want to drop the title to Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series, and they came up with every idea imaginable for Bret Hart to drop that championship. And he didn't want to because it was at a point where, he felt that he was being disrespected by Shawn Michaels, and, it just wasn't really something that he wanted to do. So what they ended up coming to conclusion on, what the idea that they ended up settling on was Michaels winning the championship or, Bret Hart vacating it. I forgot exactly what the idea was, but Bret Hart was going to drop the championship on the next night's Raw, not at Survivor Series. That was the idea that went into his head. We hear from Earl Hebner, too, obviously the infamous referee for that match, and how Bret talked to him beforehand on the plane, and he got all emotional. Earl Hebner, that is, about how, oh, no, I won't screw you, blah, 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 I won't, cost you the championship. And he's like, oh, they're going to try to count me out. Earl, will you make sure that doesn't happen? And Earl said yes, blah, 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 because they were really close. And obviously that didn't happen. And I guess the original plan per Bruce Pritchard, who was a part of the company at that time, in his mind, the original plan was supposed to be like some sort of non-finish, a screwy finish to keep the championship on Brett, which makes sense, to build to some sort of a rematch or whatever the next night on the Raw to get the belt off Brett and onto Shawn Michaels. And for Brett, it wasn't a thing where like to protect his own image, which that was part of it, but it was also to not give in to the disrespect of Shawn Michaels. The thing is, too, is that his story has stayed straight on the Broken Skull Session show, on Dark Side of the Ring, really anywhere where Bret Hart has discussed the Montreal Screwjob. In his book, anywhere really, his story has stayed the same. So there were things they talked about here they didn't talk about in Broken Skull Sessions, and things they talked about there they didn't talk about here. But largely, that was another thing people pointed out to me, was that his story is always the same. Because Bret Hart, I tend to take his word over Vince McMahon's. There were a lot of things that didn't really make much sense to me when he was talking about it on the Broken Skull Session show, such as how the plan would have been to job to Shawn Michaels and then continue to lose to him, with eventually getting maybe one win over him or something like that, which sounds bizarre. Why would he want to resign for that? But the narrative here, because he didn't really talk about that on this special, what he talked about here was how, he didn't want to leave WWE. He was very loyal to WWE. He looked at Vince as like a fatherly figure. He didn't want to leave if he didn't have to, but WCW just made the most sense financially. So what they talk about next, and this was amazing to me because I've never heard this before. I've never seen this before. I guess what happened was Vince Russo, Jim Cornette, and Vince McMahon, that is, all got together the night before the Montreal Screwjob. The original plan was to do some sort of, mosh finish, whatever, and build to either a rematch the next night or Brett just outright dropping the championship, because he didn't want to drop the belt. He didn't want to drop the belt in his native Montreal, which makes sense. But at the same time, you got to do business. But at the same time, he didn't want to give in the disrespectful Shawn Michaels. So you can kind of understand it from all perspectives here. And Vince McMahon really wanted to take the championship off of him on this show. So what finish do? We don't want to have Shawn Michaels lose to Bret Hart. He's going to be our top guy after Bret is gone. What do we do? Amazingly enough, not one, but two different people take credit for coming up with the Montreal Screwjob here. That being not Vince, because we don't hear from Vince McMahon, but rather Cornette and Russo, who go back and forth about how Cornette says it was his idea, and he never said that he wanted to say it, but it's been so long now, why not just come out and say it now? Vince Russo then takes credit for it, saying that, if it was Cornette who came up with the idea, then I wasn't there, bro. Like, I walked away, bro. I was in the bathroom, whatever. It was a really bizarre thing, because they try to come up with a plan to get the belt off of off of Bret Hart. And you would think it's one of those things where no one wants to take credit. But both of them end up taking credit, which is bizarre to me. And a lot of this turns to Cornette versus Russo. And again, it's entertaining to an extent, but when the episode is partially about that rivalry, I mean, again, it's entertaining on its own and maybe deserves an episode of its own. But to talk about that here kind of seems irrelevant. They actually end the episode about Cornette and Vince Russo having this feud for decades now. So why would they even bother to talk about that? I have no idea. But anyway, where are we here? So, like I said, Bret didn't want to lose the championship to Michaels out of disrespect. I mean, he felt like he was disrespecting because Bret Hart went up to him right before the pay-per-view when the match was first announced. Bret Hart said, I don't mind doing the job to you. I don't mind losing the championship. Don't mind losing the championship to you in Montreal. And then Shawn Michaels said, essentially in Bret's words, which I tend to believe, that's fine, Bret. I respect that. I appreciate that, but I would not do the same for you. And that was what led to the two, and their differences getting even worse going into the pay-per-view, and what led to the Montreal Screwjob. So anyway, again, I guess the original plan, according to Bruce Pritchard, who was there, his idea of what the finish was going to be was that it was going to be some sort of non-finish for Bret to retain the championship and then drop it the next night. Vince McMahon, regardless of who came up with the idea of the screw job itself, of putting Bret in a submission hold and screwing out of the championship that way, he loved the idea. That wasn't his idea, it was someone else's idea. He heard it, he loved it, they did it. So they do it, they showed the execution of it, and Scott Hall was talking about how they close out the episode with Scott Hall and his thoughts on the whole thing. He was like, they showed Bret Hart, spitting in the face of Vince McMahon. They showed him doing the whole WCW thing. Why would they do that? It's Vince's company. Why would they zoom in on that? It's like, dude, that wasn't even on the actual broadcast. If you go back and watch it on the network, none of that is even included. And he's like, oh, it's a work. Listen, I love Scott Hall, but that's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. And Jim Cornette says that too. Not the fact that it's a work, but that Scott Hall is a fool for believing that. Over 20 years later and people still think it's a work. Come on, let's move on from this already. So anyway, Undertaker got very mad afterward, throwing down trash cans and trashing trash cans and stuff like that. They kind of reenact the screw job and what happened afterward with Bret going up to Vince and punching him in the face and knocking him out cold. And they had the dark side, not the dark side of the ring people, the Jesus, what's the name of the documentary with Bret? It's escaping me right now. God, I don't remember, but they were filming his documentary and it kind of ushered him in there to kind of get a good shot of Vince after he got knocked out so they can include that footage on the documentary. And they talk about how that led to the creation of the Mr. McMahon character and how it led to him being the greatest heel of all time in WWE, which I tend to agree with. And that's pretty much it. Again, there's a lot of details I probably not glossed over on purpose, but just that I don't remember, and I took all these notes after the fact. But I thought it was a good episode. It was very fascinating to learn about the Montreal Screwjob, and I already knew a lot of this stuff for the most part. It was still interesting, but hopefully this is the last. I mean, I was going to say hopefully this is the last that we hear about it for a while, but then we had Bret Hart talking about it for like 25 minutes on Monday at Broken Skull Sessions. I think it was interesting. I thought it was a great episode. And the reenactments of all this stuff when they have like the lights dim and you can't see people's faces so it actually looked like what happened kind of helps paint the picture of what happened a little bit better as opposed to just imagining it. All the insider terms for non-wrestling fans might be a bit confusing, but other than that, I thought it was a great episode, and I very much enjoyed it. There have been better episodes. This was still solid, though. Check it out right now on either Vice.com, on YouTube. They have all the episodes up right now before Season 2 premieres this coming Tuesday on Vice, so I'm looking forward to that. But I'm looking forward to doing more reviews of these going forward, probably another one on Monday, so keep an eye out for that. The other episodes include Episode 1, The Match Made in Heaven, the story of Randy Savage and Elizabeth. We had Episode 3, The Killing of Bruiser Brody, a very, very good episode, probably the best one they've done yet, out of Season 1 anyway. Episode 4 was The Last of the Von Erichs. Episode 5 was The Mysterious Death of George's... I wrote Gorgeous George for some reason. Obviously, it was Gorgeous Gino, not Gorgeous George. I have yet to watch that one. I'll probably be watching it a little later on today, though. And then the season finale was on Fabulous Moolah, which was a good episode, too. So all those reviews should be up in due time. Probably another one up on Monday and Tuesday before the big season 2 premiere on Tuesday. And then after I'm done watching and reviewing all of Season 1, I'll get to the Season 2 episode, Episode 1 from Season 2 on Chris Benoit, and all the episodes that will air from that point forward. And this show is great. Again, in a nutshell, it's a very, very good show. So if you have yet to watch Dark Side of the Ring, definitely do so. All the episodes are currently up right now on YouTube, and they're also up at the moment on Vice.com, Viceland.com, whatever it is. So anyway, guys, be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and all that, subscribe and whatnot. All that stuff is greatly appreciated. And, we'll be hopefully right back here on the channel tomorrow with a full-on review of SmackDown from tonight. Probably not a ton to talk about, just because it will once again be emanating from the Performance Center in Orlando for WWE. And I don't think a ton is advertised as of right now. I know they're supposed to be doing a contract signing with Roman and Goldberg, and I think Gronk is appearing too. Unless they pulled that, I'm not sure. But, good episode here of Dark Side of the Ring. Be sure to check that out. Watch SmackDown tonight and check out my review of the show, hopefully right here on the channel tomorrow. Until then, guys, have a great rest of your week/weekend. Stay safe out there. Wash your hands. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.